So that's James's dinner for today. It's spaghetti with beet balls made with quinoa flour and some fresh chives that somebody gave me, so thank you. And a golden beet, some kohlrabi, a yellow flesh potato, a yam, and some green cauliflower stuff. And carrot juice for his juice. And oh, I forgot mine. No, it's over there. I'm having an African sort of stew with a teaspoon of peanut butter mixed into it, and the beet balls and a yam, as you can see, with cucumber juice, which is now being used to hold up some stuff. So James is going to be talking about turning points in Middle Eastern history. I'm going to talk about the movies, and the recipe for the African stew came from One Pot Vegetarian, based loosely on it because I mixed the peanut butter in afterwards, but I'll talk about that in a minute. So I would highly recommend The Book of Lies by Aleister Crowley. And as you can see, it came from the Banff Public Library. And I guess I'll just sit this down and talk about the stuff. Where's James's seat? You should be able to see him. So, I have a hot water bottle in here. Whoa! That seat was a little further down than I thought it was going to be. So I'll clear these things out of the way. I would recommend One Pot Vegetarian. I did mention that, right? I didn't follow the recipe exactly, but I really like this recipe book. At first, when I looked at it, I thought, oh, I can't even, it's set up differently. So I was a little bit frustrated because there's a picture in the book of the before, because it's all one pot, right? So it's a picture of what the stuff looks like before it gets into the pot or whatever, before it's cooked, and then a picture of the finished product, and on the opposite page, which, you know, I don't like recipes which devote too much space to, like, waste too much paper and ink and whatever for a recipe, and this does. This book does that. But there's something unique and artistic about it at the same time, so I liked it. The recipes are really easy to follow. They're one pot. Now, they have I would have done it differently. They have the pictures up here, and then they have down here, there's a description of the ingredient list or whatever, and what, like, chopped or whatever, right? And on this side, it's you can sit on that so your bum doesn't get wet. Woo. It's all really precarious. Oh, try not to move it. And then on this side is the cooking instructions or whatever, right? And you can come my way if you want.
I can't.
Yeah, around this way.
No, don't worry. So let's just...
Okay, I'll get the stuff out of the way, and then you can move the stuff however you want. So, crawl is kind of an interesting idea for a movie. I will move this so this doesn't fall. So, I'd recommend The Book of Lies. I have to bring it back to the library by tomorrow. So, anyway, Crawl is basically, it's about a storm, like in Florida, that everything's flooding and alligators are everywhere, and this woman is trying to find her father because she can't get a hold of him, and she goes over to his home, and the dog is trying to get her attention, shows her where he is, and so she goes into the crawl space and like down under the house, and there he is. He's been trying to fix something or something, and he's passed out. And so she's trying to pull him out, and then there's this alligator in there, and then there's, you know, because there's all this craziness happening. And So it's really about a relationship between daughter and father, and how they're like, we're apex predator kind of people, so we're gonna survive, and there's all that, but hey, in the end they survive, so whatever. I found it interesting. It's not my kind of movie, but still I enjoyed it. The Alienist was really they romanticized serial killers to make them seem like some sort of geniuses, and it could be that it's set in that time period. Because you were reminded of Moriarty, right? And Sherlock Holmes did that.
A little bit.
But he was mostly reminded of Murdoch, he said.
Yeah,
Only, like, at first it was funny, I should tell you this part. When I stuck it on, he looked up and he's like, "Is this Murdoch?" And there's a whole bunch of flesh on the screen, and I just laughed because he thought it was Murdoch. And
yeah, I thought they were
really
losing
changed
audience
up
and thought they had to go after, the people that are looking for the carnal pleasures of life.
Yeah, but the series is not worth watching as far as I'm concerned. They put a bunch of flesh in there, and some
a little bit of gore,
sort of,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And but honestly, yeah, there was another thing. You mentioned somebody's name in the show. What was it? Well, we had a good laugh of that. Oh, Carrie Fukunaga. And yeah, so we were having a laugh out of that name. It's not that it's a funny name.
No.
There's nothing wrong with that name. It's just
poor fella or woman.
I don't know. Probably got teased, and maybe the parents said something like, "Don't worry, I know they're going to be calling you fuck your mama or something, but in the end your name is going to be memorable." And a lot of people don't have a memorable name.
No.
And that's what
Like
they say
Smith.
about, who cares, right? But you have a name like Cumher Snatch, and all of a sudden everyone's going to remember you. And so anyway.
Who's that? Cumberbatch or whatever his name is?
So, wouldn't recommend this. Not worth watching.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Watch Murdoch.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Doom Patrol, the complete first season. I really enjoyed this. Super good. So,
Superhero good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, what's his name? Brendan Fraser was in this. And every time James sees him on TV now, James is like, "Oh, it's too bad he gained the weight," because James thought he was so handsome when he was young, and now
it's a big competition between him and Val Kilmer as who can fill a suit and a screen now.
But he's a robot in this, so who cares? And
he's that guy, the robot. He does a good job.
Exactly. So. And we still get to hear Brendan Fraser's voice.
Yeah, it's a pretty nice voice.
It is.
Although it doesn't sound that nice.
But I don't know that he's so suited to the character, but...
No, not really.
But I still love that he's in it.
No.
So, what else about the show? There's a little bit of a reference to opiate addiction, because the one lady who... she has 64 different people living in her body, and they all have different superpowers. She gets on this opiate to try to control everyone. Whatever.
Keep them calmed down, eh?
Exactly. But it turns out that's not the right thing to do. So, yeah.
Okay.
So there's kind of a good message there. Now, it doesn't take that long to watch, and it's a good thing to do while making beat balls.
Yeah, there we go.
Whatever. It's awesome.
Yeah,
so totally watch it. Enjoyed it. Now I'll set this up so you can move your plate and move over here so you can make sure people see you.
No, I'm gonna sit here. I just warmed this up though.
But now you fit. I went to all that work to make it fit.
Okay.
I have plastic on the table because I have all this snow that is
I'm sorry.
it's really warm. You can see the snow is just falling from the tree.
It's fairly
And-
warm.
Yeah, and
It's
so
not like Miami right now.
so there's the food's on snow and it's just skating on the glass table.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, I'm
Okay,
gonna
so-
look at how much time you have. You keep talking.
Okay. Turning points in Middle Eastern history. I'm going to tell you something. This series itself is not one of these turning points. It's more of the same. So at some point in time, this guy, Eamon Geiran, he says, this is about halfway through or even later, he says, I might be showing my early training in theology here, but I'm going, you've been showing it all along, you stupid bozo. Anyway, he's got something like a master's degree in something, not even a PhD. But he's advising things like, I think
That's
it's
different for these.
yeah, he doesn't have a PhD. Anyway, advising, I think, U.S. military, diplomats, what is it, School of Advanced International Studies in Washington, D.C. So, you know, that'd be for diplomats and all that sort of stuff. I think they were saying inside that he's also a reviewer for the Times Literary Supplement. I believe that's in England. The author of the Sahara Cultural History and contributor to the Encyclopedia of African History, Meetings with Remarkable Muslims, and Sahara Overland. So he specializes in Northern Africa. So turning points in Middle Eastern history. So he's looking at what are called turning points. So what are they? He gives a background on Muslim empires, land, language, religion. Then this is a real turning point, Muhammad and the dawn of Islam, although he should have started with 610, because I think that's when Muhammad got the call, or whatever it's officially called. But 622 is when he makes the hijrah, and that's when the Muslim calendar starts, as I recall. So he went to Medina from Mecca, and it's all downhill from there, actually. But so then Arab invasion of North Africa, 638. So that's when they started to take over Egypt. They did Egypt first, right? Fun times there. Umayyad Caliphate in Damascus. So pretty quickly, see, that's 661. That's within basically a generation of Muhammad dying. They're no longer centered in Medina or Mecca. They moved to Damascus. That's kind of weird. These are Arabs. Now understand, the natives of Damascus, i.e. Syria, are not Arabs. So this would be a function of Arab colonization and imperialization there. So Damascus still exists. Battle of Karbala, that's in present-day Iraq. And that's when real split occurred. The Shia, basically the Shia and the Sunni split roughly around that time. The battle was a function of that. Arab invasion of Andalusia, so that's 711 AD, and that's a long time ago. And that in the results of that invasion are still being felt. Poor Osama bin Laden was crying over Andalusia being lost to the Muslims, and how long after that was it? I think it was 781 years. So the Arabs
Lost
and
from the Muslims.
from the Muslims, yeah. Exactly. I might have said for the Muslims.
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, anyway. Battle of Talas, that's when the Arabs were fighting the Chinese in the western part of China. Isn't that amazing? And that's very early, 751 AD. So that's about 120 years, a little less than 120 years after Muhammad dies. They're fighting in the western part of China. And they say the Arabs won. I'm going, yeah, they didn't get much further then. Now, of course, Islam has spread well beyond that area with the Uyghurs, and there'd be a few others there, but mainly the Uyghurs in the western part of what's called China nowadays. The founding of course, a lot of things don't really belong to China, like Tibet, and eventually they'll be trying to, they've got Maoists sharing power in Nepal, and eventually they'll try to involve that in their little empire. Oh, republic is that what they call it, but it's an empire. The founding of Baghdad, 762. So Baghdad hasn't been around all this time, but you know, it succeeded the Persian Empire, Ctesiphon, and then Babel, or as the Greeks called it, Babylon, and that goes back, from what I can tell, to well before 2000 BC. Babylon didn't become a major center until after, let's say, 1800 BC. But you know, like there was a big city there called Kish. You know, there was an early dynasty there, even before they founded the Empire of Akkad, founding of the Akkadian Empire. So, you know, founding of Baghdad. That was by the Abbasids, as I recall. And then Islamic Golden Age begins, 1813, and that's Ma'mun, or however you pronounce his name, and he's called the Prince of the Infidels. He started the Golden Age, and he actually started this guy says that the first Inquisition in Muslim history. The Inquisition is not to impose religion, it is actually to try and constrain religion. See how different it is from the Christian concept of the Inquisition, where that it's an attempt to impose religion on people. So very different concept of Inquisition, very different concept of freedom actually in the Muslim world. Very different concept of the freedom is freedom from choice, not freedom of choice. Why would you question God? You know, what he does is he makes it easy for you because he makes the decisions for you. He and his interpreters on earth, and you know, like it's tough having to make decisions. So, you know, it's great to be free from decisions. So understand when people are saying they're for freedom, you got to kind of interpret what they're saying, right? You know, like read what comes not in between the lines, what's actually written down on the lines. You've actually got to read the original sources, not what some apologists are saying. Cairo University, 859 BC, way before Oxford getting founded. Geez, you know, like this is 250 years before Oxford was founded. And I'm sure most people out there have heard of Oxford University. Have you ever heard of Cairo University? You know, like the deal is, you know, he's saying, oh man, they're so far ahead of the Europeans. The deal is, it's not the founding of a university, it's what you do with the university that matters. It's what you do with it. So he's always talking about how big their libraries were. It's not how big the library is, it's what you do with it. Franklin Delano Roosevelt had a huge, big, leather-bound library in one of his offices. I don't know if it was in the White House. And apparently he hadn't read a book in it. It was for show. You know, you've actually got to read this stuff and apply it. And that, you know, that applies to everyone. It applies to latter-day would-be left-wingers, or putative left-wingers, or as I call them, fake left-wingers. You know, they don't read this stuff, and they're going around. We know everything because we do art, or we trod the stage, or we play guitar, or something like that. You actually got to do your homework. In other words, they're yellows. So many left-wingers nowadays. The Fatimids of Cairo, so this is when Shiaism took over in Egypt. The Umayyad exile in Cordoba. So Umayyads, they're Arabs. Cordoba is in Spain. So this dude is self-exile. And this is a guy who's coming from Damascus, eh? You know, that's in a different continent. And the dude, I guess, came through Africa, so it's kind of like a two-continent tour. But somehow or another, he belongs in Cordoba. So that's 781 to 1031. So it started with a dude, and they were there until 1031. Al-Ghazali and Orthodoxy. So he's supposed to be the second most important Muslim of all time, Al-Ghazali. Kind of at least a borderline Sufi, and supposed to be a very enlightened person, but you know what it says? Al-Ghazali and Orthodoxy. And what did he write about? It was something about calling down the philosophers, stuff like that. Yeah, it's fundamentalist stuff. So, you know, the guy, I don't think he was terribly enlightened. I've read some stuff that he had to say about Jews, and I'm not going to repeat it on camera. It's pretty bad stuff. So Crusaders captured Jerusalem, 1099, and all of a sudden we've had fights and all this sort of stuff. Now all of a sudden we've got villains, you know, because I guess it's because they're Christians and from the West or something like that. Understand, there's lots of bloodshed before, but it's all glorious empires getting set up. But now, because it's from the West, these guys are bad guys. And I'm going, yeah, well, you know, like what's sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. You know, if there are atrocities getting committed by people, I don't care if they're people of color, non-color, green from Mars or whatever, if they commit atrocities, we'd better call it as is. So, Muslims in the court of Roger II. So Roger the Dodger was ruler over Sicily, and he was basically a Norse guy. Isn't that amazing? From France. So he's basically a Viking, and he's supposed to be enlightened because he had equal laws for everyone. That's good. And what this dude doesn't tell you is the laws weren't equal for Jews and Christians in Muslim territories. There was special taxation and certain humiliating, you know, people had to wear clownish kind of clothes, and they weren't allowed to ride horses. I think they were allowed to ride donkeys or asses or whatever. But anyway, Roger II, he kind of had a multicultural kind of thing, and not like the phony multiculturalism that people are pounding down our throats nowadays. In other words, multiculturalism nowadays is, hey, United States, in the last 60 years or so, you've seen the population of Latinos go up by 10 times. The same thing happens in the next 2 generations, next 60 years, 10 times, 50 million, 500 million, and they'll be in the vast majority in the United States. That's not multiculturalism. It's dominance of one culture, perhaps now, to another culture. You see how that's not multiculturalism?
Yeah.
It's amazing. And then you go, you know, like they're pounding down multiculturalism in Europe, and the population of the natives in Europe, which are people of not color, yeah, actually the natives in Europe are, you know, like Europeans and stuff like that. They have no population growth, and then you've got 10% of the population in Holland with a pretty high growth rate, Muslims, 10% in France, Muslims. Eventually, that demographic is going to catch up with the Europeans. And again, it won't be multiculturalism. It will be Muslims dominating everyone else. Doesn't matter if there's Zoroastrians, Jews. Understand, 10% of the population in Holland, a guy who is in the Liberal Party, but it's really kind of like our, you know, middle conservative kind of parties, or, you know, like moderate Republican in the United States. What he told the Jews is, you know, like, I like you guys, and Dutch people actually generally like Jewish people. And but we can't protect you anymore from this 10% of the population.
Yes, well, you know, multiculturalism, I always thought that when I was young, I thought it was a good thing, because
I still think it's a good thing when it's legitimate, genuine multiculturalism.
It's good to actually accept people with differences, or
exactly right.
You know, it makes the world a more colorful
Sure.
and interesting place to have different opinions and
And frankly, it makes it a safer
customs.
place if so long as the tolerance and multiculturalism is reciprocal.
But with multiculturalism, the way a lot of people promote it, it's not the people that are supportive of different cultures and want to get together and say, like Indian food, and like what, and maybe those people are like, wow, I like your tacos or whatever. I'm just being really silly here and superficial, but you know what I mean. It's those people are not appreciated. The people that want to learn from each other, that actually want to appreciate each other's differences and try to incorporate them into their own lives or whatever, the different things.
So, oh, sorry. I thought
No, you go ahead.
Yeah, so this guy's constantly saying,
off.
hey, the Europeans got this from the Arabs, the Europeans got this from the Arabs, the Europeans got this from you, aren't they so inferior, the Europeans? And I'm going, no. You know, like he's saying the West is inferior. No, this is the superiority of the West. The superiority of the West has been just saying, oh, you got an idea there, we're going to adopt it and adapt it too. It's not just adoption, you know, it's adapting. So it's combining traditions that are brought from elsewhere and stuff like that. This is not what happened in China. This is not what happened in India. This is not what happened in the Middle East. And, never got a chance to happen in Africa because communication was cut off by, not so much the Sahara, but by the big jungles there and stuff like that. So, this trashing of the West is full. This is full of trashing of the West. It's ridiculous because if the West goes falling down in ashes and stuff like that, something else will come along and it will be the same thing. It'll be, hey, you've got an idea, I've got an idea, let's put them together.
I know, but like what I was saying was the multiculturalism, the way that it is it keeps cultures separated.
Well, that is one huge problem.
And so that way, there's people keep othering.
No,
because nobody becomes.
So you
really
get all
accepted.
sorts of
It's
othering.
just phony.
Othering mothers, as I call them. And what they're doing is saying, hey, those guys other. And I'm going, you keep on saying people of color. What that implies is people of not color. Huge othering there. Some of the worst othering mothers are people on fake left wing. Anyway, Saladin. Chivalry and conquest. So this guy's a big noble guy, Saladin, the guy who took the Jerusalem back from the Crusaders, and he didn't massacre the Christian. Hey, I have read, I'm going to have to check it up, that Saladin was pretty bloodthirsty when he was carried. Why didn't he massacre the Christian? Well, you see, he's coming from Egypt. He really initially came from present-day Iraq, I think, but he was a Kurd. And so they're found in Turkey and Syria and Iraq and in Iran now. But at any rate, he takes over Jerusalem, but the Crusaders still have things along the coast, enclaves along the coast north of there. And the key thing is, his big enemies are the Seljuks, north of him. And what he wants to do, really, is he's just saying, you see, some of the worst, most brutal people in the history of the world were the ancient Assyrians. And I'm not going, because Pauline doesn't like this, and I really don't like saying it, some of the atrocities they committed, they're so proud of them. The Assyrians, they had them depicted, described in cuneiform, almost like in verse, poetic passages about how they killed people in a variety of different inventive and not so inventive ways. And, but, every so occasionally, they'll talk about, I will mention, I flayed Baghdadi and stuff like that. And king of the Lullaby or something like that. I've forgotten where he came from. But at any rate, hung his skin off of his, off of the walls of the city and stuff like that. And then, pretty well, the next passage is, as for Bozo II, I forgave. I made him king over the Lullaby. I did this and that for him, I made sure his son. When these sorts of things happen, when you got a person who's like Saladin, who's bloodthirsty, it's all get out, when he forgives someone, there's some sort of, when he doesn't whack people entirely, there's some sort of ulterior motive. And the motive is, he knows the Europeans are up to my left, to the west, and to the north of the Seljuks. And then he's south of the Seljuks. That's trying to guarantee that the Seljuks are fighting on two fronts. Now this guy says, Saladin made a huge blunder there. You stupid guy. You get out and you head up some military, okay, dude? And then show me you got some credentials. You don't understand anything about military sort of stuff. He doesn't understand Saladin. All he wants to do is make him this huge, noble sort of person. Come on.